On this Tuesday night, putting political interests first. A damning indictment from the military ombudsman who says federal political interference impedes progress on sexual misconduct allegations.
The erratic behavior of leadership defies common sense.
After decades of inaction, will anything change? The cleanup in Quebec after a deadly tornado rips through dozens of homes. Plus, the investigation into foreign fighters in Syria. Why are the RCMP relying on reporting from global news to build their case? And the NFL player changing the game.
I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are just not necessary.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a scathing assessment of the federal government's inaction on dealing with sexual misconduct in the Canadian military. It comes from the military ombudsman, the person tasked with making sure service members are treated fairly. Gregory Lick says internal mechanisms meant to support victims of misconduct have gone from broken to collapsed.
Enough is enough. The cycle of scandals followed by studies, recommendations for independent oversight, half solutions and resistance by the department or the Canadian Armed Forces will only be broken when action is taken.
He can't take action, he says, because vested political interests complicate his ability to do his work, and he demanded his office be granted true independence from the federal government. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson has our top story tonight.
It is impossible to miss the frustration in Gregory Lick's voice.
The scandal has put on display a culture that insulates its bad actors and demands silence of its victims.
It's not often a public watchdog takes such clear and public aim at a sitting government, leveling explosive allegations of political interference.
When leaders turn a blind eye to our recommendations and concerns in order to advance political interests and their own self-preservation or career advancement, it is the members of the defence community that suffer these consequences.
Canada's military ombudsman says he cannot do his job unless the office has teeth and independence from political agendas of the day, an ability to speak directly to Parliament about abuses of power, corruption, and sexual misconduct, to carry out actual investigations, and to hold the military and government accountable when they fail to act.
He's asking for his office to report directly to Parliament, and I think that's appropriate for a free democracy.
Victims of military sexual misconduct, like Colton Skibinski, welcome the Ombudsman's recommendations and appreciate his candor.
We've had one Ombudsman, Gary Walborn, thrown under the bus for doing the right thing, and now we have another one who says, I'm not going to get thrown under the bus. I'm going to say it like it is, and I have a lot of respect for that.
Gary Walborn, the ombudsman who tried to hand an allegation to Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan in 2018, is not surprised Gregory Lick, appointed by the Trudeau government, has run into similar stonewalling and obstructionism.
It was only a matter of time until the frustration level reached where mine was and those who came before me.
For an ombudsman to accuse the current government of political interference and protecting their own careers over service members is a very damning accusation.
The Prime Minister is still making promises.
We will be making significant changes to the way the military functions in the coming months as Madame Arbour begins to make recommendations concrete.
This Prime Minister and this Minister of Defence have zero credibility on this issue.
While Lick said he has not experienced direct political interference, his report makes clear the fear of reprisal is real. And Lick criticized the Minister of Defence on delays in inaction, which he said showed a lack of ministerial accountability. In a statement, the Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan said he has always had a professional working relationship with the Ombudsman and that there has been no political interference with his office. Sajjan also said Lick had never contacted him to say he felt there was a problem.
Mercedes, the Ombudsman said it is clear inaction is rewarded far more than action. So is any action likely now?
Well, Donna, that's the million-dollar question. The government continues to say they support victims and promise action, but they won't give us a timeline or any specifics on whether or not we'll see that independence. With an election potentially looming in the fall, the pressure is on to act quickly if anything is going to get done. Donna?
All right, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. Now to Quebec, where a powerful tornado touched down north of Montreal yesterday. This is the town of Masouche today. In the span of just a few moments, the tornado wreaked havoc here, sweeping through neighborhoods, tearing apart homes and leaving piles of twisted debris. More than 60 homes were damaged or completely destroyed, and one person, a man in his late 50s, was killed. Dan Spector is in Masouche tonight. Dan, what are people telling you?
Donna, people here 50 kilometers from Montreal are now assessing damage, picking up the pieces of their homes and trying to reconcile feelings of shock and disbelief. Those who saw it Monday afternoon could hardly believe their eyes. This tornado, packing winds estimated between 180 and 200 kilometers an hour, brought instant terror and destruction, damaging dozens of homes in a small neighborhood and killing 59-year-old grandfather Jacques Lefebvre as he tried to escape.
He tried to go there, but I don't think that he had time to go inside.
Lefebvre was Michel Vachon's neighbor. They were working outside together when the tornado formed and sped toward them. Vachon managed to get indoors. His neighbor tried to hide in an outdoor shed.
The same thing can happen to me. I have just a little more, chance than him.
Lawn sets and pieces of homes blown hundreds of meters. This house under construction totally ruined. As residents combed through the debris, many came by, still struggling to comprehend it all. They never believed it could possibly happen here.
Tornadoes? You get that in Kansas, you don't get that here.
It was unbelievable. The tornado got stronger once it was on this street. And from our windows, we can see it was black and only debris.
Environment Canada investigators spent the day assessing the damage to homes, fallen trees and power lines. Their initial assessment, it was EF2 on the Fujita scale, EF5 being the strongest.
The track at about 3 kilometers long from the city into the field there.
Environment Canada did issue a severe weather alert for the area as they were tracking a thunderstorm. But the fast-developing twister caught scientists by surprise. They never issued a tornado warning for the storm in Masouche.
This one was really unpredictable. There wasn't any clear sign that it would happen this way.
While it still seems unreal to people here in Masouche, tornadoes are not uncommon in Quebec. Officials say about 7 touch down in the province each year. The last one that caused this much damage was in Gatineau in 2018. Donna?
All right, Dan Spector in Masouche, Quebec, thanks. Some good news about COVID-19 in Quebec today. Premier François Legault says case counts have dropped and vaccinations are up. So next Monday, the whole province will move to the least restrictive green alert level. That means groups of 10 can gather indoors, up to 20 people can gather in backyards and restaurants. And starting this Friday, fully vaccinated Quebecers will not need to wear masks at private gatherings, and outdoor festivals of up to 3,500 people will be allowed. The national picture is also encouraging. On average, about 900 new cases are being recorded across the country per day. It is the first time since last September the rolling weekly average of new cases has dipped below 1,000. And the vaccination rate is climbing. The government says more than 75% of Canadians 12 and up have now had at least one dose, and over 20% are now fully vaccinated. Federal officials say it is still not safe, though, to reopen Canada's borders to non-essential travel. Some restrictions are lifting July 5th, but only for fully vaccinated Canadians entering the country. Fully vaccinated foreigners are still restricted, and the next steps and the benchmarks that need to be met are not being spelled out. David Akin reports.
Encore plus confus pour ouvrir les frontières que pour les fermer.
An angry opposition.
The government has not produced a pathway to normalcy, especially for small businesses that depend on an open border for tourism.
It's time to follow the science and once again begin the reopening for families who have been separated for a long time and for businesses who are struggling to survive.
Just explain to Canadians when the Liberals will provide benchmarks for lifting federal COVID-19 restrictions.
The Honourable. And a tourism industry frustrated and anxious about a potential lost summer.
They're feeling desperate. There's no clarity on what, if any, of a summer they're going to have.
On Monday, the Trudeau government said fully vaccinated Canadians that follow a health protocol can travel back to Canada and skip quarantine, and yet fully vaccinated Americans or other foreign tourists following the same health protocol are still banned from Canada.
We're of the firm belief that a fully vaccinated traveler is a fully vaccinated traveler regardless of nationality. And so we're not really understanding why we can't open the border to our American cousins.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tried to explain the inconsistency, why a fully vaccinated American coming from, say, New York City is a bigger public health risk than a fully vaccinated Canadian traveler returning from New York City.
Being fully vaccinated against COVID-19 protects you from the worst impacts. It does not necessarily protect you from transmitting.
And so the best comfort the Prime Minister could offer to those whose livelihood depends on tourism, such as the shopkeepers here on Ottawa's famous Spark Street Mall, or to Canadians who are waiting for a visit from a family member overseas, is be patient. The border rules might change in a few weeks. But the Prime Minister offered no guarantee. Donna?
All right, David Akin, thanks. Adding new words to the citizenship oath. Coming up, long-awaited changes to the ceremony for new Canadians. In two British Columbia communities, there are mixed feelings about the Catholic churches burned to the ground this week. Both were part of First Nations communities, places of worship for people of faith, but also reminders of the role a Catholic church played in destroying the lives of Indigenous children in residential schools. Police are investigating the fires and residents are feeling the loss. Robin Gill reports.
For 110 years, Sacred Heart Church stood on land belonging to the Penticton Indian Band until a fire destroyed it. Chief Greg Gabriel grew up Catholic. As a child, he attended the church with his family, but he has a complicated relationship with religion.
I could verse the whole Catholic Mass in Latin and not my own language.
The congregation had been dwindling, but for those who practice Catholicism, it was a place for baptisms, weddings, and funerals.
The church and all those memories are now gone.
A few hours later, in nearby Oliver, St. Gregory's Church went up in flames. It was built in 1910 on land belonging to the Osoyoos Indian Band. And whatever the beliefs of the Indigenous community today, it has shaken them.
It's sad because people still need somewhere to pray.
The two fires took place in the early hours of National Indigenous Day. No one is saying there's a connection yet, but leaders say it's time for reconciliation to be expedited.
We cannot go on with the crippling legacy of racialized violence.
A sentiment shared by the Penticton Indian Band in light of the discovery of grave sites at the former residential school in Kamloops, run by the church.
That anger is not going to go away. And this is the result of the anger.
No one is condoning the fires, but there's a feeling that the anger has gone beyond the boiling point. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
Ottawa has made good on another call to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. 31 new Canadians were sworn in today with a new oath of citizenship. It includes a line officially recognizing the treaty rights of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Canada's first Métis citizenship judge, Suzanne Carrier, led the new oath.
Each and every one of us has a role to play in healing this country, because reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is a responsibility shared by all Canadians, even new Canadians, such as you're about to become.
The change is in response to the 94th call to action in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report 6 years ago. Many others have not been acted on. This change received royal assent last night on National Indigenous Peoples Day.
There we go. You've done it. Congratulations, everyone. You are now Canadian citizens.
Ahead, the legal battles over Canadians left in Syria accused of aiding the Islamic State. It's been 2 years since the so-called Islamic State was finally defeated in Syria. Thousands of ISIS foreign fighters, along with their wives and children, remain in legal limbo. They are the world's most unwanted. Many are held in custody in Kurdish detention camps in northeastern Syria, including a number of Canadians. Ottawa has so far refused to repatriate them to face charges here in Canada, and the RCMP says it is too dangerous to travel to Syria to interview them. Instead, police are gathering evidence from Global News. Jeff Semple explains.
When this ISIS propaganda film was posted online in 2014, it shocked the world. The 55-minute video shows captured Syrian soldiers being executed. And observers also noted the ISIS narrator sounded North American.
This harshness never wavered and was a constant trait of the brothers.
For years, no one, including the RCMP, knew his identity. But in October 2019, Global News traveled to Syria to interview him.
My goal was basically just to join the fight in Syria against Bashar.
His name is Mohammed Khalifa, a former IT worker from Toronto, captured by Kurdish forces in 2019. In an interview with Global News reporter Stuart Bell in Syria, Khalifa admitted to leaving Canada to join ISIS.
There are at least 14 Canadian adults currently detained in Syria accused of fighting with the so-called Islamic State. But unlike Canada's allies, including the US and the UK, who have repatriated and prosecuted their alleged foreign fighters, the Canadian government has so far failed to lay a single criminal charge or bring any of them home.
But 1 month after Global News published its interview with Khalifa, the RCMP demanded access to the recording. Global's lawyers argued that forcing it to hand over the tape would put their reporter at risk and create a media chill by deterring sources from speaking with journalists. Global's lawyers also asked why further efforts have not been made by the RCMP to interview Khalifa themselves. The RCMP argued it was simply too dangerous for its investigators to travel to Syria.
I think it is unfortunately a convenient excuse.
This national security law expert joined Global News on the trip to Syria in 2019. She explains the RCMP's reluctance to interview suspects in captivity overseas by pointing to the case of Canadian Omar Khadr. In 2017, Ottawa paid him $10.5 million in damages after the Supreme Court ruled Canadian investigators obtained evidence from Khadr illegally by interviewing him at Guantanamo Bay.
We see potentially the exact same thing here. The Kurds detaining Canadians who are of interest to our security officials in situations that are not compliant with international human rights obligations.
The tank hunters have now paved the way for the frontline stormers.
But, she says, there's nothing preventing the government from bringing Khalifa and other ISIS suspects home to face interrogation and justice in Canada.
I think it's largely a political decision. They're worried about bringing ISIS fighters back to the country, perhaps not being able to charge some of them.
Canada. Newly unsealed court documents reveal the RCMP is preparing a case against Khalifa. They've interviewed his family in Toronto and obtained ISIS documents that identify him. After an 18-month legal battle, an Ontario judge forced Global News to hand over its interview with Khalifa to the RCMP. As investigators build their case against a Canadian terror suspect in Syria, whom the Canadian government refuses to bring home. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Pride in the NFL. Next, a deeply personal revelation from a football player. There is a wave of anger tonight after European football's governing body declined a request to have the stadium in Munich, Germany lit up in rainbow colors for the match against Hungary tomorrow. It was to be a show of solidarity with the LGBTQ community in Hungary. That country passed a law which bans the display and promotion of homosexuality to those under 18. Other stadiums in Germany now intend to show their colors and light up like rainbows tomorrow. An NFL player with the Las Vegas Raiders is showing his colors. His name is Carl Nassib, and he decided to go public with the fact that he is gay. He says he agonized about the decision for 15 years. Eric Sorensen explains why and what his bold move means for others.
Defensive ends in football are among the strongest athletes in sports. But even at 6'7", 280 pounds, Carl Nassib required an inner fortitude and 15 years of agonizing to say this.
Just want to take a quick moment to say that I'm gay. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I finally feel comfortable enough to get it off my chest.
Nassib becomes the first active NFL player to announce he is gay. Like a dam bursting, teammates, opponents, and others tweeted support. The league itself saying the NFL family is proud of you, Carl.
The news of Carl coming out, the only active player in any of the big four professional leagues, it's big news. It's a piece of history.
While pro sports now promote LGBTQ2 inclusiveness, openly gay athletes like the NBA's Jason Collins are still exceedingly rare. The straight male culture, especially in team sports, remains unwelcoming. Brock McGillis was among the first pro hockey players to come out while he played.
That constant language that you hear daily from the age of 8 or 9 years old throughout your career, it just continues to beat it down in you and that you can't be you. That's why I think it's so critical that we humanize these issues for players.
Harrison Brown is a transgender man who played women's pro hockey. The world of sports is still coming to terms with the entire spectrum of LGBTQ2 athletes.
Today's culture and society, it can make it a scary space to be who you are. And being gay or being anything that's not just a straight white man is against the norm for sport culture.
A high-profile athlete like Nassib can expect a backlash, online if not on the line of scrimmage.
I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are just not necessary.
But for now, it is. In 2021, coming out still requires courage. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada is the Margaret Bowater Park in Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.